Hello, greetings. I'm here to talk about the last part of your chapter, which is chapter 9, the economic impact of globalization. So, without further ado, let's get down to it. So, key concepts and definition. We're talking about globalization here. In the first chapter, you learn about, in chapter 8, you learn about transportation networks, about technology, about MNCs, and how all these three things actually help to drive the global landscape and bring people closer together all around the world. Okay, that's the key concept of globalization here. When we talk about economic and the economy, all right, we're talking about the global economy. That means just like the previous chapter, we are all integrated together. We are all interdependent on one another, right? Interdependent on one another. Okay, we are all interdependent on one another, buying and selling goods and services between countries. So it's not just about physical goods, right? It's also about the services that is provided between the countries. Then we talk about foreign direct investment. This is companies actually investing or operating in another country. That means country A invests in country B, or likewise country B invests in country A for various reasons, which we'll go into on later. Next, we have e-commerce. This is your Lazada, your Shopee, your Taobao, buying and selling over the internet, right? Because of the technological advancements, we have things that can go through the internet very fast. So you can actually buy things from overseas, and within a couple of weeks, it should arrive at your doorstep. This is something that you couldn't do in the past, but you can do now. Next, economic growth. This is the increase in the country's output measured by this thing called GDP, or gross domestic product. Now you just need to know the naming convention of it. It's called GDP first. Okay, and last but not least, because of the globalized world that we live in, there is economic vulnerability. Whenever a crisis happens in one country, it will affect the things that are happening in another country as well, because we are all interconnected, right? And because of global supply chains and MNCs. Okay, now the next part we go into is the participation in the global economy through international trade. Okay, like I said previously, it's not just about goods in terms of food and appliances and physical goods, but it's also about services as well, right? In the closely interconnected, interdependent world that we live in today, we can seek financial aid from all around the world. We can also go to different countries to expand upon our education, and we're not limited to just one country. Okay, now one country's trade, this is quite self-explanatory, because not everybody has all the goods, right? So we can't produce everything on our own, and certain countries, they specializes in certain objects and things and physical goods and also services, which makes them a specialist in this area. So if they are specialists in this area, that means they are focusing all of their resources into the production and the production of these services. And so by us harnessing that to our advantage, we can actually get things that are higher quality, right? They are also maybe even cheaper to an extent. Okay, so this is what the particular countries are known for, and the goods and services that they provide. They're the popular ones. I'm not saying that they are the only ones, but they are the more well-known ones. So USA, you have education, right? So you have Stanford University, you have and all the other universities, have Harvard as well, Harvard University. So many students like to go there because it's prestigious and because it's always top the global world university rankings. Okay, then Brazil, you have meat. Saudi Arabia, you have fuel. China, you have manufacturing, because production cost is cheap over there, right? And Australia, lastly, you have fruits and vegetables, because Australia is such a big continent, right? Producing lots of fruits and vegetables. Now, so then we come to this thing called the foreign direct investment, or FDI. Okay, so FDI is actually money flowing between countries to build and support businesses. So it's one country pumping money to another country in order for their company to expand in that area for various reasons. All right, so they are setting up operations and investing directly in another country. Okay, and when FDI happens, costs are lower, right? Costs are lower, profits are higher. Okay, and of course there are new markets. Okay, so for example, an American company, right, to set up a factory in America is going to cost a lot more as compared to if that company were to outsource the factory work all the way to China, right, when they can get lower production costs. So that's what I mean by lower costs. And when lower costs happens, we can get higher profits, right? One of it is, of course, Apple, okay? And of course, also you have access to new markets. You have the global market to your fingertips. Okay, for the countries involved with foreign direct investment, okay, we have more goods and services. Just like today, when you walk around the different malls in Singapore, you will see that you have Luckin Coffee, you have Starbucks, you have McDonald's, you have KFC, right? These are the food industries. But of course, when you look at technology, you also have Apple, you Google, Microsoft, Facebook. They have all Meta. They have all set up companies, businesses, and offices inside Singapore as well, resulting in their services being able to come over here and we being able to access all these services as well. Okay, and when these big companies come, they set up their offices, we can learn from them, especially the technological companies, right? We can learn from the transference of skills and the transference of their technology. Okay, our citizens become educated and become having the know-how to learn how they do their operations. Okay, and this is a good thing that can keep us staying more economically competitive. All right, and to remain employable as well. And with this, with our higher skills comes, of course, better wages and job creation. Okay, so why do countries want to do foreign direct investment? Okay, of course, like I mentioned before, we have access to larger markets, more production and demand. Okay, we have tech upgrades, productivity gains, increase in capital. Okay, it's always good. If you can expand successfully, you will definitely make a lot more money, just like how Apple is doing it, right? Just like how Microsoft is doing it, just like how Facebook and Meta, Instagram, they are doing it by expanding overseas and not just limited to their domestic market, but they're also selling in the international market, which can make them billions of dollars in cash. Okay. Next part is about why it's possible in today's day and age, simply because of what was mentioned in chapter 8, right? The driving force of globalization. So you have increased transport networks, right? Not only you have your airplanes that can bring people from one country to another country to a meeting very quickly, right? You also have the shipping networks. This is for your production companies, your Shopee, Lazada, and all these things. They can actually, people can use the platform to buy and sell goods because of the advancement in shipping technology, which can get their goods quicker to Singapore. Next, technology. Okay, just like Shopee, Lazada, what I said just now. Okay, digital tech allows you to sell goods to other countries very quickly, and with the advances in online payment, this is all even more seamless today. Okay, link to this is your e-commerce, right? Which is what I said just now. All right, now we come on to this thing called economic competitiveness. Because we live in this global landscape, right? So we are all competing with one another. So how does a country actually stand out to ensure that we can get ahead of the competition? Okay, that's a key learning point here. Okay, because why do we want to get ahead of the competition? Because of trade and investment, right? Naturally, is the ability to grow your economy. So when MNCs actually go overseas to invest, right, they're looking at a few things. Okay, first, does the country actually have the infrastructure and technology to suit, the creation of all these factories and all these networks and offices and expansions all across the world, right? Because if the country does not have the proper infrastructure, then things are going to get messy, right? The processes efficiency of the productivity of the company is going to be worse off, all right? Then we talk about labor costs. This is where manufacturing is largely talking about manufacturing, right? So for manufacturing factories and all these things, they're looking at lower labor costs. So they want to find countries in which they do not need to pay so much for their production costs. This will keep their profits higher, right? Of course, it's not just all about manufacturing. We also have the knowledge-based economy. So things like biomedical sciences, all these things which requires a lot more skilled manpower. So does the country actually have the skilled manpower to initiate and carry out all the tasks that the company requires? Okay, so this can be in the form of educated workforce as well. Okay, so it's not just about the lower skilled areas, right? So it's about the high skilled areas as well. Next, we have political stability, because of course, when you go into that country, you are investing, you don't want to lose your money. So if the country is going through a lot of political turmoil, or at any point in time the government can just take over your country, take over your factories and your businesses, like what happened before in history, right? Then of course you wouldn't want to take this risk. So you're assessing the country based on its political stability, and this is something that Singapore really has the advantage in, because Singapore has been relatively political stable, right? We don't have much riots and all these things going on, and hopefully it will continue to be this way. Okay, So then we have the technology, right? Does the company actually have the technology available for them to use? Okay, are the workforce efficient? And last but not least is the labor cost again, which is the same thing that I said previously. Okay, now we come now we come to not so good things, which is the economic vulnerability. So there are good things and bad things, right? In participating in the global economy. So for the bad things, of course, we are more vulnerable, right? There's this thing called the supply chain network. Okay, just like your MNCs depend on different areas to function well. If any one of these areas would have a crisis, a political crisis, or any form of other crisis, then the whole supply chain is going to be affected and prices are definitely going to increase. So global interdependence means we are overly reliant on one another. Okay, for example, the Russian-Ukraine war, which is currently ongoing, right? Because fuel is needed for all these war machineries, right? So hence the fuel prices have increased. So when fuel prices increase, right, it affects every other thing as well, because shipping and all these things, planes, traveling, transportation, they all need fuel, right? So if fuel prices increase, that means the cost of transportation, the shipping to get from one country to another country is more expensive, and in doing so, your prices will also go up. Your price of the individual goods will go up as well. Okay, then we have another phenomenon called unequal impact, right? So countries that are more self-reliant are less impacted by this crisis, whereas countries that are highly dependent on trade in particular, okay, they will be highly affected even more, right? Because they have nothing to depend on. They have no domestic market to depend on. The global trade is the thing they are feeding their country. They are helping their country to make money, right? It's a Cai Fan store. Okay, so if it's disrupted, then things are not going to look as good. Okay, as a country that has the domestic capabilities to survive on their own even without global trade. Okay, so chain reaction in the global economy is just exactly what I said just now. So when one country faces crisis, the other country is going to face job loss and spending drops, right? The other country is going to face job loss and spending, and then demand for this group is going to fall. When demand falls, the other country's businesses is affected, and then there's a ripple effect across the borders. Okay, so the recent thing is the Trump's tariffs, right? Trump's tariffs actually make things a lot more expensive, and even though the tariffs are targeted towards specific countries, however, as countries that trade with these specific countries, our economy will also indirectly become affected. Yeah, so that's how that's the meaning of why interconnected and interdependence is such a big thing, okay, in today's globalized world. Okay, now going back to the vulnerability part, when MNCs actually close shop, all right, or when big crises happen, people tend to spend less. So when people tend to spend less, that's when less goods are being sold. And because production costs are high, for example, your rental and business costs and labor costs and lawyer fees and all these things are still there regardless of whether you sell your goods or you don't sell your goods. Hence, some companies may be forced to shut down because they can't sustain their companies. And when they are forced to shut down, then of course you have your job loss. All right, and so this job loss is then linked to people having less income and the inability to afford basic necessities such as housing, food, education, and healthcare, as written over here. Okay, this thing is called standard of living. This will mean that your standard of living will start to fall. So in summary, globalization brings across good benefits, but globalization also brings across risk. So the benefits is you have a larger market, right? More investments, better tech and skills, and economic growth. You have access to larger markets. You can grow your companies even more, right? They're not limited to the domestic market, but also the international global market. However, there are risks involved as well. Okay, when crisis starts to happen in one country, it can actually affect the whole global supply chain and can lead to demand for that product falling drastically, which means that jobs can be lost, living standards can fall, and countries can be over-reliant and over-dependent on the global trade. Okay, now we moved on to individuals. Okay, the impact on individuals. So as an individual participating in the global economy, okay, when there's growth in your country and growth around the world respectively, there are more jobs available. Okay, when there's more demand for goods, right, because consumer markets are big in the global market, correct, So hence, companies will expand, and when companies expand to fulfill the manpower cost to produce all these goods, naturally there will be more employment available. So you, as the worker bee, will have more employment opportunities. Okay, next we have your foreign direct investment and MNCs. When they come into Singapore, because they have access to all these economies of scale, right? Their production costs are relatively low because they have big operations. They can afford to pay you better pay. Okay, you can also learn new skills from them as well. All right, so you're not limited to what you can learn in your own based on the companies that are in your country, but also the foreign companies that come here and bring across their new technologies and new skills as well. Okay. Last but not least, we have tech and transport. Okay, gives us access to overseas jobs. Of course, things are not all rosy. We have some challenges as well. So here are your challenges. When MNCs actually move overseas because they find new opportunities elsewhere, or it's cheaper to produce elsewhere because new markets have opened up, then when they move, right, that means they are all their jobs are also going to shift to the other country, resulting in a massive loss of jobs. Okay, next, with globalization, right, we can share technology, share knowledge, especially with AI and all these things, right? So when we are sharing things, things progress faster. That's why you see technology improve so much drastically over the past few years, because the global knowledge base is big and we're all learning from one another. So that also means that our technological advancements is also going to improve, right? Also because we are competing, right? Apple's competing with Google, competing with Xiaomi and all these companies. So we need to really stand out, and how we're going to stand out is through our R&D, research, development, to create the new technologies, to be the first one to make the breakthrough. So when this happens, right, unfortunately some jobs are going to be replaced, especially with the advancement of AI, right? So that's what I mean by automation will replace low-skilled work. So that's the danger of globalization, right? We're going to advance much more faster. And with this advancement, there's going to be automation, which is going to replace robots, right? Robots and AI going to replace your low-skilled work. Okay, and last but not least, of course, with people being able to move across countries, we have the local workforce facing competition from foreign labor. All right, so you're not just competing with Singaporeans, you're also competing outside of Singapore as well, with the people who are coming here to work as well. Okay, so now we come to the part where the government plays an important role. All right, we cannot just let our citizens cope. We need to, sorry, let me rephrase that. We cannot just let citizens cope on their own. We have to provide some kind of support, especially for those who are really in need of this support. Okay, so the government has really thought of this thing called tripartism, in which the government will work with the trade unions and the employers together. Okay, so you have NTUC, SNEF, and MOM. Job creation, raising retirement age, training, employment practices. These are all done to help protect our local workforce, to ensure that they remain employable. Okay, ensure that they remain employable in the global landscape, so that their standard of living will not drop. They'll continue to have a good salary in which they can afford their basic necessities, and even some of the ones that they have as well. So the standard of living will go up, will continue to go up. Right, so we need to protect ourselves from the global economy, and so these are the measures done by the government to help workers move on, right? To help workers move from old jobs to new jobs and help them stay employable. All right. So at the same time, Singapore as a country, we also need to remain economically competitive. And by doing this, we need to enhance our cooperation. So we have a nice picture over here between Singapore and Australia. And so how do we keep this cooperation going so that we can get the trades that are to our advantage? Okay, we have free trade agreements. And the main thing is to remove tariffs, right? To remove tariffs and make trade and investment much easier. Okay, so we have so free trade agreements is the term. Okay, so we have bilateral free trade agreements, which is between two countries, just two. So our main one we have is Singapore-Australia Free Trade Agreement called SAFTA. We also have others like China, Japan, and the US. Okay, all this allows us to sign contracts and have increased business cooperation between these countries, allowing for the exchange of skills and knowledge and the exchange of jobs and etc. etc. Okay, so for Australia, one of the big things we have is our university exchange, right? So I think there's some form of agreement in place whereby we can actually choose to go and study overseas in Australia, okay, to get our degrees and such. Government response. All right, how does the government actually keep up with what is happening in the global marketplace and continue to attract investments? Well, the government has all these agencies put in place, right? So first we have MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, which helps to manage the reserves and ensure a stable currency, right? We need a strong currency in order to participate in the global marketplace. Next, we have GIC, okay, Government Investment Corporation. Government Investment Corporation. Okay, that's what it means. Invest in global assets to grow our national wealth. So they are the one investing our assets, okay, so that we can continue to grow. Our money, the money that we earn, can work harder for us. Next, we have EDB, okay, Economic Development Board. Okay, this is the STEP board provided by ensured. This is the STEP board initiated by the government that will help to partner with MNCs, the multinational corporations, to create jobs and increase innovation inside Singapore. And last but not least, we have Enterprise SG. So if you are new businesses, okay, or if you are a small and medium enterprise, the government will actually help you, okay, to innovate and expand overseas. So the government will give you the guidelines, the processes, teach you the processes and all these things are actually meant to help companies expand overseas. Alright, so that Singapore can be well known in the global marketplace and not just be limited to our domestic market. And of course, the case study a textbook gives is called a Secret Lab, in which they expanded to Japan and the Philippines. And of course, this company has also been a key supporter of esports, right? Sponsoring all the esports and chairs that you see whenever you have these competitions. So Secret Lab has worked hand in hand with Enterprise SG to ensure that they can sustain their business operations and they have the know-how in order to expand overseas, which they have done effectively and successfully so far. In fact, you see behind me, I'm actually sitting on one of these Secret Lab chairs. Okay. Now, we have individual responses. So the government is also actively not just taking care of the companies, but also taking care of the individuals as well. Whenever a crisis strikes, there should be measures put in place to help these companies to survive well. All right, so you have your COVID-19. This is what happened during COVID-19, right? So we have 4 billion stabilization and support packages. We have wage and cash flow structure. We have rebates, rental waivers, and 1.6 billion CAN support packages for families, especially those for low income and for the seniors. So COVID was something that has happened previously, not too long ago, and of course the government has spent a lot of money on this thing. Okay, but it is meant to help us Singaporeans to stay resilient and to sustain ourselves so that we can tide through this period. Okay, so as you can see, the government plays a crucial and key role in helping our citizens and the people in Singapore to not just survive but thrive. Okay, and government support for businesses. All right, just like the Enterprise SG role, right? The government has also done many of these such projects to help SMEs to actually expand themselves and grow. Okay, one of it is called the Go Digital program, which was initiated in 2017, just before COVID, right? Helping SMEs to avoid advance in tech. Okay, it was so successful that 80,000 SMEs were actually on board on this program, and it helps to digitalize their business so that they don't just sell to the domestic market, but they sell to the international market as well. Because in the online space, right, we are actually not linked by physical distance, right? You can actually sell overseas as well, and you can also make things a lot more convenient for people. Okay, so we have this case study over here of Miss Lily Low, in which COVID disrupted her sales, but she joined the Go Digital program. She actually had an ikan bilis, believe it or not, ikan bilis business that grew into a full-scale factory, affecting global customers, right? Because she had an open mind. She decided to take up this program. She learned about the skills of going digital, and this helped her business to really expand. And through this expansion, she can actually survive and tide through this COVID-19 period. But not just tide through, but it also created the opportunity for her to advance her business, all right, to a very big scale, right, the global scale. Okay, So what do we have to do as individuals? We have to adapt, we have to learn the skills, right? Just like this lady over here. We have to learn, we have to adapt to new skills, to stay relevant, to be flexible, to be open-minded, of course to invest for tough times, and to always be prepared for career shifts. So the world is ever changing, right? From one part to another part, from one area to another area. Last time we have technology, technology advances very quickly, so we have to stay updated. We have to be adaptable, all right, in our skills. So for the final takeaway here, okay, globalization can bring both growth and challenges, and countries must stay responsible and respond wisely to stay competitive, to be adaptable, build resilience, and prepare for global change. So bear in mind, the learning point here is that it's not just the government's role to help us cope through any crisis that we face, but we as individuals and companies as well, we have to play our part to look out for ourselves, to keep advancing our skills, and to keep learning new things, going along and supporting, complementing the government efforts in order to help Singapore grow as a whole. Okay, Singapore is made up of different companies and individuals such as us, and it's up to us, right, to light that fire and help our companies, help our country to continue to grow, especially because of our status in the global marketplace, because of what we are as a small little nation that is highly dependent on the global marketplace. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is Chapter 9, Economic Impact of Globalization.